Life Insurance Corporation of India has bailed the Indian government out many times over the years. But it may not be able to do so as freely after the IPO proposed by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in her budget speech.
Listing of companies on companies' stock exchanges brings discipline, and it disciplines the company and provides access to financial markets and unlocks its value. It also gives opportunity for retail investors to participate in the wealth so created. The government now proposes to sell a part of its holding in the LIC by way of initial public offer.
If the LIC gets disciplined, as promised by the Finance Minister, and plays by the rules of the market, top politicians will not be able to arm twist the insurance giant to bail out government as and when needed. Here's a look at LIC's investments. At the end of March 2018, it had 26.3 lakh crore invested in the stock market. But nearly 85 of every 100 rupees invested in the market is either government companies or government securities like bonds. The portfolio of shares in public sector enterprises has accumulated through multiple bailouts through the years. In 2010, LIC had to shell out 11,500 crore rupees to buy government's shares of REC, NMDC and NTPC because other investors weren't forthcoming. In 2012, the then Congress-led government had to rely on LIC to buy shares of ONGC after a tepid market response. In 2014, it was BHEL disinvestment. In 2015, it was Coal India. 2016 saw LIC buying Indian Oil shares. In 2017, LIC nearly bought 3/4 of GIC shares offered by the government to the market. And in 2018, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited shares were up for sale from the government and LIC had to buy 70% of the offer. It also owns stake in 6 state-owned companies like MTNL and SAIL. Air India is up for sale next, and there are no interested buyers declared as of now. LIC could have been the savior yet again, but this time, the Modi government has decided to sell the golden goose itself. Not just that. Whenever the stock market tanks, LIC has invested millions of rupees to prop it up. But once it is listed in the market, these tricks will be tougher to execute. The disclosures will lead to a lot of discontent. There is another part of the problem arising from the number of times LIC has been forced to invest in companies that many others won't touch with a barge pole. The investments in many loss-making companies, public sector banks in trouble will also weigh in on the valuation of LIC. LIC owns stake in 21 state-owned banks, 11 of which are buried in bad loans and under the RBI monitored cleanup. Far from profiting, LIC owns stakes in companies that are struggling to survive. If the government wants to get the best price for the shares of LIC, the insurance giant may have to offload the thousands of shares of different companies in the next few months. When shares are sold in bulk, it can drag these individual stocks into an abyss and dent market sentiment severely. On the flip side, LIC may get truly cleaned up in the process, and that is good news for the millions of policyholders in the country. The company's books and operations have been opaque for way too long, and millions of policyholders have trusted their money with LIC. Listing will force some amount of transparency. If it has to toe market regulations and focus on business alone, it has the potential to be at par with some of the world's biggest insurers. As economist Shankar Iyer recently argued, LIC can evolve into a bank like many of its global peers like AXA and Berkshire. But before we get gung-ho about the potential for LIC as a listed company, investors must remember that the LIC stock will still be controlled by the Indian government, much like the PSU banks that were sunk by poor governance, bad decisions and crony capitalism, despite the sector controlling 70% of the country's banking system. As the numbers show, the market value of one private entity, HDFC Bank, is more than all the listed government banks put together. So yes, a cleaner LIC, accountable to private investors instead of government, is good for many. But a government that is addicted to dipping into the insurer's kitty year after year is unlikely to let go of the habit just because it is now listed on the stock exchanges.